Welcome, my friends, to the Bob and Brad podcast. My name is Mike Keenitz, and today I'm interviewing Kiara Armstrong, who is a yoga educator, massage therapist, and creator of the rubber band method. Today's podcast is sponsored by Human Kinetics, who is the proud publisher of Hands-On Yoga Assist, written by today's guest, Kiara Armstrong. It's an effective guide to hands-on assisting that's raising the standard for safe touch in yoga. Visit the Human Kinetics website to explore other top titles like Complete Guide to Yoga Props, Instructing Hatha Yoga, Adaptive Yoga, The Physiology of Yoga, Motivational Yoga, and the best-selling Yoga Anatomy that has sold over 1 million copies. Now through September 30th, 2025, you can save 30% on all yoga and Pilates books at the US humankinetics.com with the promo code BBYOGA. Valid for U.S. customers only. And while you're there, make sure to sign up for their yoga and Pilates newsletter for exclusive discounts and expert tips for instructors and practitioners of all levels. So without further ado, we're going to get today's guest on, Kiara Armstrong. Well, thank you so much, Kiara, for joining me today.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So we are going to be talking about your hands-on yoga approach called the rubber band method, and specifically your book today. So I think we can just get into the questions right away, if you don't mind.
Yeah, love that.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became interested in yoga?
Yeah. So I've been practicing yoga for about 25 years. Of those years, I've been teaching for about 15. And I came into teaching yoga probably the same way that many yoga teachers come into teaching, which is it had such a positive impact on me that I wanted to turn around and offer the same tool to others that was so effective in my health and well-being and healing. Where how I found yoga was actually not on purpose. I kind of stumbled into it. It was, again, 25 years ago. I was a teenager in college and I was just fulfilling a course credit requirement. And this class was described as stretching. So I thought, cool, let's do it. That sounds easy. It
Sure.
wasn't easy, it was intense. The form was Iyengar, and you hold the postures for a really, really long time. But over the course of that term, I had such profound effects occur in my nervous system that I hadn't anticipated. And I was essentially hooked because I really liked the way that it made me feel. And I didn't know that at the time I had a really dysregulated nervous system. And so what it was doing was essentially regulating me. And over the next several years, I would learn that I had complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And so yoga was helping me through that. And that's essentially how I fell in love with it, was by using it as a tool to regulate my nervous system and bring me back into health.
I always think of it just as stretching, but I suppose
Yeah.
there is a relaxing component to it. So it's
Yes.
interesting that's how you got hooked.
Yeah, well, and not even just the relaxing part, because, and I think a lot of people feel this way, but when I initially started practicing, I didn't want to relax. I wanted to like do 1,000 chaturangas and, move my body as kind of vigorously as I could. And that was what was helping me. I kind of was exhausting myself into relaxation and would love those shavasanas. And now, decades later, it's quite a bit different. I don't approach my practice that way. It's much more about the relaxing, but yeah, so
So you have a background as a massage therapist, correct?
I do. Yes.
And so how has that in conjunction, so a lot of people that don't know massage therapists, you have to learn some anatomy, I presume, correct?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah.
Is how has that affected your teaching of yoga?
It in so many ways it would be hard to even define. So yoga, right, in the West is very much a physical practice. If you go to the East, it's a little bit different. Like when I studied in India, it's a lot about meditation, it's a lot about balancing the body in order to attune the mind. But if you ask anyone in the West what yoga is, it's essentially a physical practice. It's a workout, it's a movement based practice. And so anatomy directly informs that. And it informs it in myriad ways, from understanding how each asana, which is the posture, so what you think of as warrior one or warrior two, how that posture affects the body, what muscles it's targeting, what muscles it's challenging, what muscle groups, etc. It also helps inform safe alignment, so what structures need to be protected in different shapes, different postures. It helped for me with sequencing because it gave me something to focus on. But yeah, anatomy is threaded into every single piece, including touch, in the sense that I did come into teaching yoga touching from the very beginning. I was raised by a massage therapist. I've, informally been performing massage my entire life. And when I came into yoga, I actually got my first role through hands-on assist. I was assisting my mentor's class, and a studio owner was in the room, and he received hands-on assist from me, and he offered me a job immediately after. And so that anatomy, coupled with a massage background and massage training, kind of morphed into this form of offering touch within a yoga classroom that is purposeful and really complements the practice instead of kind of just being an add-on. It really is synergistic with the practice.
Yeah, some of the I've heard of Warrior 1 and 2, but some of those other terms you're throwing out sound like a foreign
Yeah.
language to me right now.
Yeah. Which ones? Tell me.
I don't know what you even said, so I can't repeat it. But I would say, yeah, when I'm normally, if I've ever done yoga, I went to a few classes and then COVID kicked in. So then I've done it more at
Yes.
home. So
Hmm.
like follow along, but most of the time I don't. I'm like, oh, this is stretching this right now. Like I know the anatomy, obviously. So
Sure.
that's just more
Yeah.
or less what I'm thinking in my brain. But
Yeah, which is
yeah.
really important because it's good to know, that triangle pose, for example, targets your inner thigh or adductor muscles, not just your hamstrings. And so, from a teacher standpoint, it allows you to really thoughtfully shape your classes on how you want to target different parts of the body. But as a student, it helps you learn, oh, those are my adductors. Hello, inner thighs, you're nice and tight. And so it's helpful on both ends, I think, knowing the anatomy.
So what makes your approach to yoga different from others?
There is so much yoga in the world that I don't know if it's necessarily different, but what makes it uniquely my own is that I use yoga like a wellness toolbox for targeting the nervous system, specifically for targeting the nervous system. It was how I was able to heal from CPTSD, but I learned so much about stress in that healing journey and how yoga affects it, that now how I kind of turn around and bring those tools to students is looking at stress as a common problem or health effect that we all face, because stress is really on a continuum. No one escapes stress. And on one end you have a really regulated nervous system and someone who just experiences stress every once in a while, and maybe they're looking for just the occasional stress relief. On the opposite end is, of course, PTSD and things like that, where you have a dysregulated nervous system. But there's everything in between, and no one kind of gets away from it. It's a biological response, right, to have a stress reaction. And chronic stress can lead to myriad health implications as far as high blood pressure, obesity. I mean, the list goes on and on. Anxiety, depression. For me, it was even as severe as like fibromyalgia and IBS. And so the way that I approach yoga is, let's bring down the stress regardless of where you're at along that spectrum. Because yoga is this toolbox of breathing exercises, which is termed pranayama. It does have mantra, which is where you basically, sing or chant or whatever it might be. And that's actually vibrating your throat and stimulating your vagus nerve. And there's touch, of course, that I bring in, and that's a bottom up way, so body based way of regulating the nervous system. So music even has implications for vagal toning, but there's just all these different ways that we can take the yoga space and really turn it into this maximal healing space for regulating the nervous system. And that's how I like to think of my unique approach to yoga.
So most yoga instructors I know are just content being yoga instructors, but you decided to write a book on it
Yeah.
called Hands-on Yoga Assist
Hmm.
and the rubber band method specifically. So what inspired you to write this?
Yeah. So for me, touch was the kind of missing link in finding balance, finding homeostasis, finding healing. And I never really understood why. And it's been a journey creating the rubber band method. I've been giving assists from day one in my 15 years of teaching, but it's really evolved and it's become its own methodology, right? Its own approach to doing it that really complements the practice. And I want to bring that into healing spaces, wellness spaces like yoga, because I think that touch is an underestimated, undervalued, underutilized healing tool. It is a tool that really does have a lot of benefits to our health. When we think of touch, we often think like healing touch, we think of massage. But the thing about massage is that that's targeting soft tissues. That's specifically your muscles, your joints, et cetera, your fluid flow, et cetera. It's very gross anatomy, it's body based. But touch also affects mind body. It has a huge impact on our mental well being. So within my book, I offer this chapter that's called The Science of Safe Touch. And I call out this meta analysis that was done on 137 different studies on touch. And I think within that, it was almost 13,000 people that were included in the various studies. And they found that touch has huge implications for your mental and physical well being. Touch that is consensual and feels safe for the person, and it helps if it feels good, can lower cortisol. So that's literally lowering stress in the body. The experience that people reported is feeling like they were lowering their stress, and it would also mitigate future instances of stress. Touch can bring down anxiety, it can bring down depression, it can lower blood pressure. So, touch is this tool that's not really being used, but the science is showing if you use it with the intention of kind of holistic well-being, mind body well-being, it's a very effective tool. So why aren't we using it? So I'm bringing the book out to say, hey guys, let's add this to the toolbox. Yoga is a wellness space. Let's add this additional tool that can really amplify the benefits that we're already getting from the practice.
Yeah, in physical therapy, you have certain clientele you don't need to touch if they're, outpatient younger people, which I have sometimes. But I worked in nursing homes for a very long time, which is
Oh
very
yeah.
hands-on touching all the time.
Yeah.
And then in the clinic, I mean, I still see people that are older that have had orthopedic surgeries or other issues. And oftentimes, yeah, they'll come in and kind of stressed, whether it's a joint replacement or something else. And oftentimes there's a lot of hands-on requirement needed, and they'll be all wound up, and then you help them with it. You get your hands in there, and then all of a sudden they kind of relax. And normally at the end of the session, they feel better, and they think you did this magical stuff to them. I'm like, not really. I just like pushed you to what you already had.
Yeah.
So kind
Oh,
of
I
a
love that. I love that, Mike. And that's such a pointed example of how simple touch can be, but also the effects that it can have, right? I mean, it just has this grounding effect, this feeling of calming down. And it's not even really about the science. It's about how do you feel when, you get touched. If it feels good, that feel good sensation is actually that whole storm of neurochemicals that are balancing you out, that are helping your health. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that with me.
Yeah, it's very weird in school because I didn't think that in my head. And then we're literally like you and your classmates get very comfortable with each other very fast because it's you so much hands-on. You don't realize when you're, going into school. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's funny. I mean, in massage school, everyone jokes about how, like, by the end of the term, everyone's just like effervescent because they've just been touched this entire
oh, sure.
time,
Yeah.
So everyone's like high on oxytocin. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine that's a lot. Yeah. I had 2 days of massage in school, so my practicality of that's a lot less, but still.
Yeah.
So, your book is tailored towards more of an yoga instructor, but obviously the layperson could benefit from just reading it or learning about it more themselves and maybe presenting it to their instructors they have. So, what can someone learn from this book?
Yeah, so the first half of the book is the methodology. So it just kind of gives the context. And it is really geared towards yoga teachers. But if someone isn't a yoga teacher and they want to experience safe touch that really enhances their practice, like by all means, give it to your yoga instructor because at least all the instructors I know, we love books. We're like book junkies. And so it's a great gift to give to your teacher. But in the methodology section, I do cover the science of safe touch. There is a bit of anatomy, like I go over heart rate variability and understanding the implications of stress in your life and how it affects your health. But then the rest of it is like, how do we do this tactfully? How do we bring touch into a classroom that is skillful, that complements the practice, that keeps both the teacher and the student safe? And then at the end, there's 15 different techniques that within the rubber band method, there's well over 50 different techniques and growing. Like it's endless, really, that the ways in which you can provide purposeful touch. But the 15 that I chose were for like a vast array of class styles. So you could include, different ones in a more active class and other ones in a more passive class, and that they could be included in either a one-on-one practice if you're with a private client or in, a standard studio setting.
So, what? Why did you call it the rubber band method?
Yeah. So one thing that I've noticed, and this goes back to the massage background, is that, and maybe even in, physical therapy, and I know in chiropractic school, because I've worked with chiropractic doctors, quality of touch is something that's trained. It's like understanding how much pressure you're going to apply to a 70-year-old versus a 20-year-old. And yet, within the yoga world of offering touch and assist, we don't really talk about quality of touch, how touch is a tool that really needs to vary based on the person that you are working with. Well, when I put together this methodology and I was presenting it in my teacher training programs, I took for granted that I have basically had a lifetime of training in quality touch. My mom is a massage therapist, and she taught a massage therapist while she was practicing. And so I took for granted that I already knew how to read tissues. I already had really attuned tactile awareness. I could pick up on what I was sensing in people's bodies. Well, in the teacher training programs, I'm presenting this methodology, the stances, the techniques, and everyone was either doing it too forcefully or too light. And there was no quality of touch training. And so I eventually realized, okay, the best way to teach this is to give them an analogy that anyone anyone could grasp, and that was of a rubber band. So when you stretch a rubber band, it, believe it or not, feels a lot like body tissues. When you stretch body tissues, it feels a lot like a rubber band. And like a rubber band, you'll get to this point where, the rubber band has been stretched and it resists. It kind of pulls back towards its center. It doesn't want to go any further. That's exactly what the body does, and so it's called the rubber band method to, I guess, name it after its heart, which is teaching quality of touch, teaching students, or I'm sorry, teachers, how to read the body tissues of their students, or how to listen with their hands, as I call it.
Sure. No, that's interesting. I'm just imagining my tight hamstrings as you said rubber bands.
Yeah, some tissue feels like it's already stretched, like it's like taut. And then you
Yeah.
know what? And that's, everyone's built different. And that's why I love the quality of touch piece, because you could touch one person and they kind of feel like a rock, and then you feel another person and it just feels like they could stretch forever. So there is differences in tissues from person to person, and so having that quality of touch, you can adapt your touch based on what you're feeling.
Yeah, I would admit, I feel like most of the people I see have already, not all of them, but a lot of them have had surgery, or they're just super guarded because they've had pain for years. And they always be like, "Do you feel the knots?" I'm like, "I just feel a whole big, like, tension in your whole muscle." I'm like, "I
Yeah.
don't really feel a knot." I'm like, "You're
Yes.
just firm." I'm like, "It is not relaxing at all." Like, I could tell that, but
Well, and wouldn't you say that you could feel from that surgery where the scar tissue is,
oh,
that
that,
there's
yeah,
that,
there's
yeah,
surgery
that,
site, yeah.
but that adhesion, it's like you can
Mhm.
press on another part of the body and you can feel that it's pulling from that scar.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much information you can get when you start taking in the cues from the body. But again, that was something I took for granted. I could just pick up on that. And a lot of yoga teachers aren't necessarily exposed to that type of training, or that understanding that, oh, that pull that I'm feeling, that resistance is coming from their scar tissue, that is coming from that, kind of adhesed tissue.
Yeah, I would say the one I can't figure out quite yet is we get some of these older people that have knee replacements, but they had such limited motion for years before that that like some of them I can't get their knees straight again. And it's just
Mm,
they're so tight and they're so guarded, and you can be as relaxing or as aggressive, or like you can try rolling with them. I'm just like, I don't know. I've had a few. I just cannot get to settle down. I don't know if you have any
yeah.
tricks, but
Yeah, I would say this is what I've experienced with like really resistant tissue like that is less is more. So find that bound and then stay with that bound. So like say you're doing the assisted stretch and you've brought them in and you're looking to extend the knee to lock it out or whatever and it's just not going there. Apply that assist, that pressure, and hold it there. But repetition is key, so you are working one on one with someone. Like less is more, get to that bound, hold it, and then maybe do it again, maybe do it in other sessions, but give it the time to eventually hydrate. And with time, those collagen fibers to like extend out and give you more length. Because as you know, and I'm sure listeners know, if you force the body, good things don't happen.
yeah, oftentimes they don't like to do. There's also, for people that don't know, like knee replacements, sometimes they'll doctors are doing manipulation later if they have
Hmm.
too much scar tissue, and it's kinda interesting because 'cause they'll be like when they're, asleep, they literally can get them to full flexion and full extension, and then when they're
Mm,
awake, they just guard, so it's kinda fascinating to me.
yeah. Yeah. That is interesting.
I think they need that relaxation part you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, if that's something that you're building into your sequence, I find that people do relax. I mean, I loved in your example by the end of the session with people you were working with in the senior citizen homes, they were relaxed by the end. I wouldn't start with that stretch at the very beginning. I would move that towards the end. They've had, say it's an hour session, had 45 minutes of feeling, this feel good stretch. They're flooded with oxytocin. They got the endorphins running. They've got dopamine. Everything's just kind of working in their favor. They're nice and relaxed, and then go into some of those deeper stretches. Not to mention that they'll be warmed up and have better fluid flow.
Yeah. So how do you approach building trust before offering hands-on assistance in a class?
Yes. So for me, trust is all founded in providing agency and autonomy within the class. So when someone feels like they have agency or control over their body, they are going to trust you a lot more. They're going to feel like they have boundaries and that, they feel safe essentially. And autonomy is someone's ability to say, no, I don't want to be touched, or yes, I'm okay with being touched. And then the teacher honoring that. So, as for a teacher, it's really important that we create agency, uphold autonomy by asking for consent and asking for consent in a way that is really clear to the student of what you're asking for, what are you asking permission for. And within the rubber band method, touch is something that is used in two different ways, not just one. So a lot of teachers will just correct with touch, or they might just assist with touch. I'm proposing that touch can be approached in these two different ways, where there's one quality of touch to correct, which is called an adjustment. And it's a very, very light touch. And you're just guiding the student, bring your knee here or shift your body here. The assist is a little bit stronger touch, but it is receptive. It's feeling for those safe bounds. And so when we're asking for consent to touch someone, we're asking permission to, hey, can I use touch to correct you? Can I use touch to maybe enhance the pose a little bit? When someone knows what they're consenting to, then they're very clear about offering their consent, if you will. It's clear what they're saying yes or no to. If they don't know what they're saying yes or no to, it can be a little muddied, and that's where the trust is kind of like, well, why are they touching me? And then when you're asking for consent, doing it in a way that is tactful. You don't want to ask the whole class with everyone looking around, is it okay if I offer assist today? Someone might feel peer pressured. They might feel like they have to say yes. I remember my dental hygienist just thought, oh, I just thought I had to be touched. I thought that was just part of yoga, even though I didn't want to be touched. And I'm like, no, your teacher really should be asking permission and doing it in a way where you feel like you've got a little bit of privacy and that you do have that autonomy to say no and that it's totally okay to say no. So that to me is how you build trust, is by getting permission, doing it tactfully, and making it really, really clear what they're granting consent for, whether it's to be touched to correct or touched to kind of enhance a pose.
You're a lot nicer than I am with that. I mean, I'm pretty good,
Yeah.
but some of my I'm so used to some of my patients. I just like kind of grab their leg, and I'm like, and they're like, okay, and I'm like, oh, I probably should have asked. I'm just used to this.
Yeah, no, I love that you brought that up because what's funny is most of my personal training friends, they'll say, "Oh, I just touch my clients. Like I don't really think about it. We don't have a
Yeah,
conversation." For me, as someone who's had a trauma background, and even that dental hygienist I was referring to, she actually had PTSD. She's a vet. For both of us, touch is something that you really feel like it has a big effect on your nervous system. And when it's not necessarily consensual in the sense that you've explicitly said, okay, that's fine, you can touch me, it can make you feel stimulated. It can create that stress response. And over the years I've heard from various different students, tons of them, and it's like, what if they don't like the way the teacher is or the trainer, whomever it is touching them? They don't feel that there's any way to kind of opt out. They're kind of afraid to have that awkward conversation of, hey, would you not touch me? you know
yeah,
and also I think that I brought up the trauma piece, but that's because at least in the US it's shocking the number of people statistically when they've done studies who have experienced like contact physical violence from an intimate partner, and then even sexual violence. Like a lot of people have experienced bad experiences around touch. And so being really mindful and compassionate that it's like, I don't know what this person brings into this room, I'm going to just make sure it's cool. That way I know that it's very clear to me that when I touch them, it's going to be helpful to them. And that's not to make anyone wrong, it's to like bring in compassion, that around like, I might think touch is great and wonderful, but this person actually might not.
yeah. I will admit it's normally the middle age and older. I do that. If anyone is like younger than me, I always have this like weird thought in my head. So with them, I always like I demo on myself, and I'm like, you should feel it here. Like I don't know, just subconsciously, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the
Sure.
nursing home people always needed the
Yeah.
gloves on, so I just used to grabbing. But
And I think that's great. I think that, I mean, truly, as long as it's consensual, more touch the better. I think it's wonderful. I think that that's how we create connection with other people, and it really is good for us. I think that like what I'll recommend to teachers is, because I obviously offer touch. I have been from the very beginning. I'm all about it. And I might mistakenly touch someone. So what I do is just like a precursor is, hey guys, I'm going to be offering touch today. If you prefer not to be touched, let me know. And I am doing it in a tactful way, but I do it right at the beginning. So that way the class knows this is what's on offer. When it comes to private clients, I just do it in the intake. I say, hey, we're going to be working together. This is something that I offer. Would you like that? Would you like not? At any time you can opt out. And there's just this open dialogue about the fact that I will be touching them and how, and that it's totally optional.
do you feel in therapy, I can always tell when I'm working with an athlete because they really understand how their body moves in
Yeah.
comparison to the average person. So with
Yeah.
them, I feel like I never have to like touch them physically and they just know what to do. And some of the other people, it's like they don't understand how to do this movement. So I'm like, okay, feel this area. Now make it
Yes.
do this. And then I'm assuming it's the same thing in yoga.
Yes. Oh, I love that you brought that up because that is a big piece actually in my chapter that is trying to clarify these terms adjustment and assist. So in the yoga world, we'll kind of have this catch-all term that all touch is adjustment. And adjustment is not really the best word to use for all forms of touch. Like adjustment means to change, right? And so I'm proposing there is assists, there is adjustments. And in an assist, you have the quality of touch of a firmer pressure and you're directing the tissue somewhere very intentionally, but receptively. When you're dealing with an adjustment, you're using touch very lightly and you're saying, hey, just press your knee towards me. Say it's warrior two and their knee is caving in. You can place a hand as a target. Now, going to this adjust side and looping back to what you were just saying, when you go to adjust or correct someone, you don't always need touch, right? You can with a lot of athletes, they have incredible body awareness, very, very attuned proprioceptive awareness to know, oh, okay, all I need to hear is press my knee towards my pinky toe, and I'm going to stack that joint over the ankle. Done. But there are a lot of people who haven't toned or attuned, I should say, that proprioceptive awareness yet. And so we use that little tactile cue. We're not moving them, we're not doing the work for them. We want them to learn it in muscle memory and in their own body. So you can use that little kinesthetic cue of like, hey, bring your knee towards my hand. And they've got that contact point. They feel what to do in their hip in order to create that alignment, but they're also training that proprioceptive awareness. And that's what's so big as far as all of this, because in assist, for example, you are enhancing the pose, you're adding a little bit more stretch, grounding, or ease, and so you're building even more kinesthetic awareness. People are like, oh, in the hip press, for example, in child's pose, they feel their erectors lengthen and they become even more attuned to say how tight they are, or if there is an adhesion. Going to scar tissue, you offer an assist and someone goes, oh yeah, I can feel in my body how bound up it is in and around my scar. And that's not to, evaluate anyone's tissue. It's just, as the perceiver, as the person feeling that, that's what attunes that proprioceptive awareness that you're referring to, that most athletes naturally have, but not all people have.
Yeah. So, what are some common mistakes teachers make when offering hands-on assists?
Yeah. So a big one is asking permission, how they do it, requesting consent. I really am a proponent of doing it in a way that makes everyone feel like they're privately answering, So maybe everyone's in child's pose face down and you're just asking the room who's declining, and they give you a thumbs up, and the person next to them has no idea how each person has responded, and whether granted or denied consent. Another one that I see is body mechanics. So in massage, it's huge. We're always training body mechanics, and I'm sure for you, how are you holding your body when you're entering someone else's space so you don't injure yourself when you're working with someone? And the last one I would say is where to place their hands and how to direct their pressure. It can get a little muddied and confusing. Am I placing my hands on the upper glutes, or am I placing it on the ilium or the hip bones? Am I pressing straight down? Am I lengthening towards the crown of the head? All of that can get a little lost sometimes when someone's offering touch. And so in my book, I try to address all of those in the sense of how do we, get permission if the person is consenting? How do we do it in a way that feels private, tactful, and discreet? How do we hold our bodies so that way, whether we're assisting someone on the floor or someone who's standing, whichever pose they're in, do it in a way that feels really steady and secure for us? And then excuse me. And then also, like in the book, I have anatomical diagrams, and on the anatomical diagrams, it shows little highlighted spots. So the teacher knows directly where they're placing their hands and also how to direct their pressure. So it's highlighted right on there. You know exactly what structure you're touching. So it's completely clear how to make the touch or the assist synchronous to the pose or to the practice.
Is there like a general rule of like how much pressure the assist should have?
Yeah. So for the most part, in an assist, you want to just take up the slack. Like that's the simplest way of putting it. Take up the slack and get to where it's taught. And when TAUT, taught. And once it's taught, like hold that little bound, just go an edge further, see if there's a little bit more. And I say it that way because some people it feels like they're taught, but you just go a little bit more and then that's that sweet spot. You're not forcing, you're just kind of asking like, hey, can I go a little bit further here? And if the body feels like it's resistant or you'd have to apply more pressure, nope, that's the bound. That's the edge. That's where you stop.
So, how does the rubber band method support injury prevention for both students and teachers?
For teachers, I'll kind of address that one first. It's your stance. So I have an entire chapter dedicated to the stance. How do you hold your body? How do you make sure you're not loading your low back? How do you make sure how do you make sure you don't fall on top of your students? Because I've done that. I have done that. I have knocked students over. I mean, I've done everything wrong in in learning this and
Sure.
creating this methodology. 100%. So the stances I would say for the teacher, and also I try to tell teachers like your body comes first. The assist starts with you. You need to be supported in your stance. You need to make sure you have enough room. You're not right up against the wall and compromising your body mechanics to try to offer this assist. So that's for the teacher. I would say for the student, there's a couple of things. One assist does not fit all, like even a child's pose assist. If someone has knee or ankle injuries and they kind of have their hips lifted, so their hips are more over their knees than back towards their ankles, that person should not receive a hip press in child's pose. So there are over 50 different techniques that I teach and 15 in the book, and they range from the feet all the way up through the neck. And so you can pick an assist that looks appropriate for the student. You want to find a student who is comfortable. They look like they're safely aligned. It looks like they can naturally breathe, and then apply the assist. When you're applying the assist, this is the next level and truly where the safety is at. It's that quality of touch. You're listening to their cues. Does the person hold their breath and tense? Are they shaking? Like these are cues where, okay, that's too much. I want to back off. But that first line of defense is just taking up the slack, feeling for what I call the dense edge, where that resistance kind of shows up, and just stay there. And you're holding for a breath or two. And if it looks like they continue to breathe, they're like fully enjoying it, that's your sweet spot. And in my experience, injuries don't happen there. Injuries happen when we're forcing, we're not paying attention, we're moving too quickly, we're trying to do one size fits all, meaning, oh, everyone loves child's pose hip press. No, someone with, say, a knee replacement is not going to love that assist. It's going to be injurious to them. So that's how we as teachers keep the students safe, is using that quality of touch, but then also only choosing students to assist who look comfortable, safely aligned, and have consented to touch.
So, what's one mindset shift about touch that could help yoga teachers and students?
Yeah. So what I want to propose, and the shift that I'd love people to consider, is what if touch is actually the missing link to like mind body wellness? If you look at studies on longevity, if you look at studies on happiness, one of the key factors for both is relationships, right? So if we have good relationships, there's a likelihood that we're going to live longer and that we're going to be happier and with better health. Well, how the body interprets relationship is connection. I mean, it's as simple as that. The body's very primal. Your body doesn't technically know this is a spouse, this is a friend, this is a coworker. Like how the body interprets relationships is through connection. And connection, at least on a biochemical level, is through touch. It's through oxytocin, it's through all of these neurochemicals that make us feel like we are connected to others, to the tribe. And when we are connected, we see these improvements in health and well-being from the mind, from the body, from the emotions. And so I want to propose the idea like this could be one of the missing pieces that we need. Many people feel very isolated and alone, and that's the opposite side of, this connection that creates longevity and wellness and happiness. So yoga teachers, could we start including this possibly and see some of the benefits that it might produce?
Yeah, weren't there studies looking at infants that were born with touch or less
Yes.
touch, and then like how they
Yes.
developed and how like worse off the infant without touch was?
Yes, and what's interesting to me though is that we become adults and we go, "Oh, well, I'm not a kid anymore. Like I don't need it. It's
Yeah.
not the same for me." But we're not different. We're we're the same organism, we're still a human, and if a child responds in that way, why wouldn't an adult? And I can't help but go back to your example of the older individuals you were working with and how they just calmed. It breaks my heart a little bit that a couple of years ago in America, the Surgeon General announced that we had a loneliness epidemic. I mean, it's very, very real that the opposite side of that coin, when you're not connected, when you don't have these relationships, or at least that felt sense of connection, it does hurt your health. I think he said that feeling lonely or having that sense of disconnection is as bad as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and that it can increase your likelihood of dementia, stroke, heart disease, etc. I mean, it's real. Either side of that coin, it can really be detrimental to our health, that lack of connection, or it can really improve our health, and the simplest way to create that is with touch.
Yeah. So, if someone is a yoga teacher and they're new to this method, how can they start implementing it into their classes?
Yeah, I recommend the book, of course. I also have
Sure.
online programs. So I have four different online courses that start with the foundations, which are the same assists or techniques that are in the book. And then they get a little bit more advanced and go all the way up through level four, over 50 techniques in total. But say they get one of those resources. First, get to know the methodology, read about it, understand how touch has powerful implications in the practice, but then play, practice, get a colleague or a friend or someone or a family member and play, if you will, really attune that kinetic awareness, like start to listen with your hands, start to interpret the cues that are coming from bodies. And then once you've practiced with friends, you've openly been able to make mistakes and just learn and get feedback, then start with one posture or one technique at a time and bring that into your class. Bring that into your session, whether it's one-on-one or a public classroom. Plan that in. Maybe it's the downward dog front press that someone's using. Plan it in 4 or 5 times in your class. And then, once you've perfected it over a few classes, add in another technique. I think starting small is the best way to approach it because yoga teachers are already juggling so much from maybe their playlist to their sequence to cues to the students in the room, and this is just another layer. So start small, build that confidence, get familiar in your body, how to hold your body properly and safely, and then start building your repertoire.
So, before I get to the rest of my questions, I just want to say that people can find your book, I know, on Amazon or Human Kinetics and most retailers otherwise, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And where could people find more information about you, like your website?
Rubberbandmethod.com. So they can find all the courses there. I also have a blog. Um, they can visit me on any of the social media well, most of the social media platforms. So I'm on Facebook, Instagram, excuse me, Instagram, LinkedIn, Threads. And so I try to make all of my platforms educational. So that way we're kind of continuing the conversation and diving deeper into the content that's in the book. Because I know with books and even online courses, they're kind of just one-sided. So that's the place where they can interact with me and ask questions and we can continue learning together.
So, I know you alluded to this answer earlier,
Mhm.
but do you want to talk about how you can implement this with big classes or one on one specifically as well?
Yeah, I would love to talk on that. So I have been applying these assists to public classrooms. I mean, packed public classrooms where it's really a challenge to get your stance and make sure it's aligned, and one-on-one. And in the book, I talk about in the stances section specifically how yoga teachers can basically modify their stance to complement a crowded classroom or just one-on-one with a private client. Because like with private clients, for example, you might be holding the assist quite a bit longer. So you want to make sure that your stance is really comfortable and that you can be there for a bit. Versus in a public classroom, if someone's in downward dog or the whole group is in downward dog, you could potentially assist two or three people, depending on how long you have them there. And so the idea is how do you use your body to be able to either move somewhat quickly between people or stay a bit longer while not sacrificing the integrity of your body. But depending on what you teach, it can be used in either setting. And for me, it was very successful for me in growing my following at the studio and also growing a really healthy um, private practice. I mean, I saw people for years and years and years, and we were strictly essentially doing hands-on yoga assist the entire time.
So, what kind of feedback have you received from
Yes.
this method?
Yeah. So it has been a really long time since I've been offering these assists in class. So I've really received a range of feedback. In fact, the reason why rubber band method is even in the world is because I had a friend say to me, and she was a yoga student who's trained with me. She said, "No one else is doing this. I haven't experienced this anywhere. You really need to bring this out in the world." And so that's what spurred it, writing the book and bringing it to a larger audience. But beyond that, I hear, "Oh, that feels so good." And that's really important because I think that for the touch to be beneficial, it does need to feel good. It can't compete with the practice or confuse the student. It needs to complement the practice. And when it feels good, in the simplest terms, that's when the person is experiencing that kind of neurochemical cascade that's really good for their health, that is benefiting them. I think the biggest benefit, or not necessarily benefit, but feedback, if you will, or compliment that I've received is just a growing following for myself and for the people that I've trained. Students feel the difference. They notice it. It feels really good and it does enhance their practice. And so your growing just or your following just grows. You'll have packed classrooms. I wouldn't be surprised for most people. That's how people I've trained, the teachers that I've trained, that's been their experience, is that their following starts to grow, their workshops start to fill, their private practice starts to grow. And that, to me, attendance, showing up, that's the biggest compliment. That's saying, yes, this is great, we want more.
Yeah, they wouldn't keep showing up if they didn't like it.
Totally, 100%.
So, is there a way to adapt this method for people that have limited mobility or some sort of special needs where they can't necessarily get into all the poses correctly?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think the answer to that question is that not one assist is appropriate for every single student, right? So, or put another way, it's not cookie cutter. Going back to the example of child's pose, we wouldn't offer the hip press or a child's pose assist to someone who's had a knee injury or has something going on with their ankles. And so if someone has limited mobility, or if they have a special need that is limiting certain assists, certain techniques, just cut them out. Offer a different assist, offer a different technique. So the idea is that you offer what is safe for that student. In essence, an assist is enhancing the pose in some way. If someone is already struggling with a pose and it needs to be modified, then they're at their max. They don't need more. It doesn't need to be enhanced. That, I'm sure, in their experience, that is an enhanced pose, right? There's a lot already going on for them. And so of the 50 plus techniques, pick one that is applicable for that person. At the end of the day, the idea is that we're making contact so that way we're helping this person's physiology, their overall mind body wellness. And so you could offer the arch palpation in Shavasana, you could offer neck work, or the chest press. I mean, there's so many different assists that could be applied that aren't necessarily about stretching someone, range of motion, or anything else as far as their capabilities in yoga.
So, do you have any other projects or new trainings you're currently working on?
Yeah. So, no, I mean, yes and no, in the sense that, I mean, I've put it all out there, and right now I'm just trying to raise awareness. I'm trying to, let yoga teachers know, like, hey, this is a way that we can bring in this wellness tool that really enhances and aligns with the practice, that is purposeful touch, that's anatomy informed, that is consensual, that does support agency and autonomy within the classroom. And so right now it's just about spreading the word, raising awareness. In the future, I'd like to do more in-person trainings, but for now it's mostly about doing it through online. However, this weekend I am going to Bali to teach a 200-hour teacher training, and will be including rubber band method, but I don't necessarily have any new ones beyond that on the horizon.
Oh, you got a trip ahead of you, huh?
Yes, very long one.
Well, thank you so much, Kiara, for joining me today. Would you like to mention where people can find you at online again?
Yeah, rubberbandmethod.com, and then Instagram, Facebook, Threads, LinkedIn. You can find me at the same Rubber Band Method. And yeah, please come, follow. Let's start the discourse. Let's start learning together. I would love that.
Yeah, I will put all your links in the show notes for anyone curious. And thanks again for joining me.
Thank you.